Hey everyone, this is Ryan Khan, and today we're gonna talk about the all-time superstar, Pela. So, before I begin, I just want to introduce you to Pela and tell you a little bit about her, who she is, and what she basically does. Like, what is Pela? What kind of a character is she? This is gonna be a chill video, guys, so grab a cup of coffee, grab a drink or a snack, chill, relax, and by the end of this video, I'll try to make sure that you understand who Pela is, what her kit is, how she works, which teams she fits in, and whatnot. Okay, so what is Pela? So in Honkai Star Rail, you have a bunch of different kinds of supports. You have healers, you have tanks, and then you have supports that basically amplify the damage of your damage dealers. Now, when we look at this category, you have two kinds of damage amplifiers. You have hyper buffers, such as Tingyun, Bronya, Sparkle, etc. And hyper buffers basically buff your hyper carries so that they can deal more damage to the enemies. Now, the other kind of supports that basically achieve the same thing but in a different way are debuffers. Pela is one of them. Pela shreds the enemy's defense, allowing your damage dealers to deal more damage. The only other character that I can think of which is very similar to Pela is Silverwolf, who has basically the same kit, except that she doesn't do an AoE attack. She is mostly focused on single targets, bosses, etc. And Pela has been an S+ tier character since the start of Honkai Star Rail, and it holds true to this day. And that is, there's a bunch of reasons behind that, and one of the main reasons is that Pela is capable of shredding defense in an AoE, which is absolutely massive. She has a very high uptime for her burst, which helps her basically keep the debuff up on her enemies 24/7, pretty much, which is insane, especially considering the fact that she's a 4-star unit. She is very, very capable. Her traces are stacked, and we're gonna take a look at her traces as well as her Eidolons, as well as her Lightcones very soon. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Pela's traces and her kit. So as I've already said, guys, it's really no rocket science. Her ultimate is an AoE. She AoEs, she shreds the enemy's resistances. Once the defense is shredded, they're vulnerable to damage whoever your hyper carry may be, whether it is Dong Hong, whether it is Jing Liu, maybe Argenti, maybe Dr. Ratio, etc., etc. Even dot units like Kafka can work with her. And that's pretty much it for that is like the bread and butter of Pela's kit. I don't know why I keep calling her Kayla. Like, what is wrong with me? Anyway, let's take a look at her ultimate, which is Zone Suppression. This guy's right here is the bread and butter of Pela. This is the real deal, the main part of her kit that makes her so busted. Deals ice damage equal to 108% of Pela's attack. Now, okay, so before we talk about her defense shredding capabilities, if you take a look at Pela's traces, you might notice that a lot of her traces are actually geared towards dealing more damage, such as attack boosts, ice damage increase. Then you have her bonus ability that increases the damage of the next attack by 20%, which you might find weird, but do not be fooled. It doesn't mean that she's a damage dealer, if you will, but she is predominantly a debuffer who also seems to have damage dealing capabilities, which means that you could build her as a sub DPS slash defense shredder, but I would not recommend going down that rabbit hole, and I would simply focus on maximizing her defense shredding capabilities and go all in on speed. Anyway, I digress. Pela is predominantly a defense shredder, and her ultimate basically deals damage when exposed. Enemies' defense is reduced by 42% for 2 turns, and by so all enemies. Pela is not restricted to a single target. She attacks and shreds the defense of all the enemies on the screen, which is huge. And by 42%, to put it into perspective, if you look at the other defense shredder, who is Silverwolf. Now, Silverwolf is a limited 5-star character, and her ultimate base chance to decrease the target enemy's defense by 45% for 3 turns. And then the same thing, like Pela can Silverwolf could also have, you could also build her as a sub DPS, but that's a topic for another video. Over here, Silverwolf is debuffing, shredding the defense of a single target for 3 turns, whereas Pela shreds the defense of all the targets in an AoE, and she does that for 2 turns. I honestly think that in terms of shredding defense, Pela is objectively better than Silverwolf, which is actually insane, since Pela is a 4-star unit and Silverwolf is a 5-star limited character. She does shred by 45%, whereas Pela does by 42%, but that's pretty much irrelevant because the 3% difference is not that big, especially considering that Pela is doing an AoE attack, whereas Silverwolf is not. And that is the bread and butter of Pela's kit, shredding the defense of all the enemies. On top of that, Pela's skill removes 1 buff from the enemy, which is actually huge. Remember that annoying Ebon Deer that keeps healing and then buffs himself, applying this insane attack buff and then this insane defensive buff? Well, guess what? Pela can just straight up remove that by simply using her skill. So that's another very powerful trait that Pela has. Now, that said, what makes her extremely gangbuster is the fact that she can keep up her ultimate. Like, she can get her energy up really fast, and she has a built-in energy engine within her kit. Looking at her talent, data collecting. If the enemy is debuffed after Pela's attack, which it pretty much will always be, Pela will restore 11 additional energy. Note that this is not 11%, this is straight up 11 energy, which is huge. This effect can only be triggered 1 time per attack. Yeah, so if you have a debuff on the enemy, which is gonna be like, there's always gonna be a debuff on the enemy if you have Pela in your team. You'll get a cool 11 energy back, and this tremendously helps you keep Pela's ultimate up at all times. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at Pela's Eidolons victory report, when an enemy is defeated, Pela regenerates 5 energy. So on top of that, she has another Eidolon, which is her E1, which is bolstering the same thing even more, making it even easier for you to keep up the defense shred on the enemy by simply regenning her burst over and over again. This actually results in Pela being able to keep all the enemies' defense shredded at all times, which is absolutely insane. Her E2 is using skill to remove buffs, increases speed by 10% for 2 turns. Another extremely good quality of life, which also indirectly helps keeping her burst up once again, because if you go all in on speed and then you have adamant charge on Pela, she can move even faster, which means that she will gain more energy, which means that she will get her ult faster. So Yeah, it's pretty simple, guys. She does AoE defense shred, and you can keep it up at all times. That's literally all you need in a lot of scenarios. And yeah, 3 is suppressive force. That's kind of not very useful. I mean, unless you do go for the sub DPS Pela slash debuffer route, it doesn't really matter much. But then her E4 is when skill is used, there is a 100% base chance to reduce the target enemy's ice res by 12% for 2 turns. So you've already shredded 42% defense from her ultimate, and on top now, if you have her E4, you are shredding the enemy's ice resistance by 12%, which means that if you're using an ice DPS like Jingliu, you're gonna deal even more damage. After that, you have the talent level up for ultimate, which is not really that relevant, and 6 bolsters her attack even more. So when Pela attacks a debuff enemy, she deals an additional ice damage equal to 40% of Pela's attack to an enemy. So this is not really that relevant if you're building her as a debuffer, which 99% people are. So yeah, but all in all, honestly, even if you have her at E0, she's already a gangbuster support because she's doing a ton of defense shred and she's doing it in an AoE. Eidolons are just gonna make it better. Now, we've talked about her traces, we've talked about her Eidolons. What about her Lightcone? Guys, I could go ahead and name a ton of different Lightcones that you can use in her. You could go ahead and use Silver Wolf's, well, it's not her signature Lightcone, it's the Lightcone that if you were playing Honkai Star Rail during the event when they gave away Silver Wolf's free 4-star Lightcone, can work quite well on Pela. Otherwise, other options would be let's see now. Honestly, I would just stick to Pearls of Sweat because that is literally the best Lightcone that you can use on Pela. And what Pearls of Sweat does is that when the wearer hits an enemy and if the enemy is not already ensnared is basically a debuff, then there is a 90% base chance to ensnare the hit enemy. Ensnared enemy's defense decreases by 15% for 1 turn. So now this is another defense shred. If you have Pearls of Sweat, you are going to apply another defense shred on the enemy. So now you have the 15% defense shred from Pearls of Sweat. You have 42% defense shred on top of that from her ultimate, and if you have her at E4, she's gonna shred an additional 12% ice res on all the targets since her ultimate hits everyone. So yeah, you see how absolutely cracked she is now, right? So yeah, Pela is an extremely versatile unit. She can really fit in with any team that you can think of. She can fit in with Dan Heng, she can fit in with Jing Liu, she can fit in with the Doctor ratio. The great thing about the defense shred mechanic in general is that it is a debuff as opposed to something like, for example, Bronya. Bronya does not really apply any debuff. She instead buffs your ally or the hyper carry to deal more damage in the next attack. Now, the great thing about having a debuffer that actually applies debuffs to the enemies is that a lot of characters in Honkai Star Rail are dependent on dealing more damage to maximize the efficiency of their kit. Doctor Ratio is a good example of that. For example, if you look at Doctor Ratio's kit, you have this bonus ability called Deduction. When dealing damage to a target that has 3 or more debuffs, for each debuff the target has, the damage dealt by Doctor Ratio to this target increases by 10% up to a maximum increase of 50%, which is insane. And honestly, if you have someone like Pela in your team, getting that 50% increase is not hard at all. In fact, it is mandatory if you want to maximize the damage that you can deal with that hyper carry. I mean, yeah, you could take Dr. Ratio and throw in hyper buffers like Tingyun, Bronya, Sparkle. It'll work, but you won't be efficiently utilizing his kit. And I say this because there's Dr. Ratio, and I'm sure that we will have more characters, probably even some characters in the next banner that I will talk about in another video that might actually benefit from debuffs just like Dr. Ratio does. So yeah, the point being that she's extremely versatile. She can work with hyper carries that rely on debuffs, and she can also work with hyper carries that do not rely on debuffs by simply amplifying the damage for them, which makes her extremely versatile. And all of these things, guys, I think you can put 2 and 2 together now. That is why she's so highly rated, and every other person is recommending you to build Pela, including me. I think if you don't have her, I would highly recommend getting her. And I guess let's go ahead and take a look at her relics. Honestly, as long as supports are concerned in Honkai Star Rail, guys, you don't really need to focus too hard on the set bonuses, because you really are focusing on the stats. And by stats, I mean speed. Speed is one of the hardest, if not the hardest stat to obtain. My Pela is not the fastest. She's sitting at 151, but it really does help you to be able to take more turns in a single cycle, because that is how you maximize your team's potential. And nothing beats taking another turn is simply going to trump any other stat that you might have on your characters. Well, in Pela's case, you don't really need anything, except maybe you might want to have a little bit of effect hit rate, as I have here. Honestly, she has a 100% base chance of applying defense shreds on her skills, on her ultimate, but it is affected by the enemy's effect resistance, so it's not a bad idea to go for effect hit rate. Other than that, I would recommend going for a speed boost for more speed. For her sphere, I would go for HP in order to increase her survivability. And rope, of course, is going to be energy regen, because you want to make sure that you can ult as much as possible. Now, that said, you might not need to focus on you don't have to focus on the sets or set bonuses more than you need to focus on her stats. But as far as the 2 ornaments are concerned, Broken Keel is my go-to option on pretty much every other support. You can't go wrong with it. It gives you it basically forces you to get a minimum of 30% effect resistance on your character, which is very helpful in resisting those nasty stuns, debuffs, and whatnot. And on top, it'll give a cool 10% crit damage increase to your allies, including your hyper carry. And buffing your hyper carry is the main point of having a harmony support in your team. If you don't want to go for Broken Keel, One Back is another great option. Forwards action by 40% also increases your energy rate even more, as if we didn't already have a ton of energy regain sources. But yeah, so yeah, that's about it, guys. That's about it for the kit and her light cones, etc. Very versatile unit, very powerful. You can't go wrong with her. If you have her, I would highly recommend you build her. If you don't, you might want to consider getting a copy. As I've shown, she's super viable even at E0. And speaking from experience as a Genshin player, the other game by Hoyoverse, as well as a Honkai player, I've been playing for years. Genshin for years, Honkai since launch. I can guarantee you that if you play this game continuously, you'll eventually get her Eidolons, so that won't be a problem. Now, that said, it wouldn't be fun if I just yap about her for like a half an hour and not show you guys how good she really is. So how about we take a little trip to the Memory of Chaos, and I can show you the difference between having Pela's defense shred and not having Pela's defense shred. Let's go to MOC 12. Yep, okay. Also bear in mind that the enemies are not weak to ice, so the damage you're gonna see is without, although it does, this particular MOC does boost the skill damage quite massively, so you may not have your Jingliu deal this much damage, but that's besides the point. I mean, it's gonna scale accordingly, right? Okay. So now, let's go ahead and charge Jingliu's ultimate. Buffer up a little bit with Tingyun's attack buff. Now, one single skill from Pela, boom, her ult is already up. Yep. We're not gonna use it this time. So let's see. Let's go ahead and use Jingliu's ultimate. Okay, not bad. Okay, so he still has like a cool 30-ish, a little over 30% HP, I guess. And that was without Pela's ultimate, like we didn't even bother with that. Now, let's go ahead and see what happens when we do use Pela's ultimate. By the way, one thing that I didn't mention is that Pela's technique that you just saw, it further decreases the target's defense. Surprise, surprise. Oh wow, okay, so this guy didn't get frozen, no problem. Getting the attack buff. Pela's defense shred. No, not the defense shred. Skill moves, buffs. Okay, now let's use Pela's ultimate. Boom. And now let's see what we hit. Boom. If you remember, he was at a little over 30% HP after I used Jingliu's ult and skill. And now brother is almost dead. Like he's already at like what, like 40 something percent HP. And I'm guessing this, yeah, it overkilled him, basically. That's the difference that Pela, and even this guy is dead. Honestly, I probably would have killed them both, to be honest, if I had targeted him instead of the Mechatron. So you see the difference that Pela made there? Would have actually killed them all like a turn earlier. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Hope you take away something from it. And if it helped you out, if you liked it, a thumbs up would be great. Consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.